going to be letting other people in, and this will be recorded just so that everybody knows. We'll make it available on YouTube, I expect. I'll say just a few words of introduction so we can get started soon, but just welcome, and I'm glad you're able to join us. Last year in July, Martin joined us and gave what for me was a really eye-opening and pivotal talk on the role that the sort of the story behind single-use plastic. And I'll just tell you just a few words about Martin and his background. He's executive director of the Berkeley Ecology Center. He is in every way an expert on this topic, and he is quoted often as a source for news
Sure.
stories in NPR, Politico, New York Times, and
Thank you
other
so much. You don't want to
journals of
sit,
that nature.
listen?
Um,
Okay.
Great. Hi, Wendy.
Hi.
Yeah. Um, so we're delighted to have him back, and he is someone that I have learned from tremendously, and I think we all will now. So we'll we'll turn things over to Martin, and let I would just say if you can, because we have a lot of people participating, if you can put yourself on mute until we kind of do questions, it would probably be a good thing. Um, and if anybody is having trouble getting on and still in the waiting room,
No, there's
please.
nobody in the waiting room.
Okay, great. All right, so that doesn't apply. Um, Good to see everybody on this election night. This It's interesting. I'll just say a word or two about the reuse committee. We have grown a little bit in our mission. We have really taken on the role of being a forum for us to educate ourselves about the impact we have on the earth and the environment and what we can do about that. And we've just had some, I think, some really terrific uh, speakers, and we are soon starting a battery collection program um, that, and we have a sort of exchange zone reuse armoires in two of our buildings, and been working with the facility management to try to facilitate better recycling here. Um, so I'm very, very happy about what we've started to accomplish and hope we'll accomplish more in the coming year. So I will, Martin, you've got the ability to share. It looks like we're fine.
Yep.
Do you want to get started?
Sure. It's a pleasure to be with you all and Clark and the Zero Waste team there. Thanks for inviting me. It's such a joy and pleasure to be with you. I'm so impressed with the work that you all are doing. It's not every HOA that has their act together in the way that you all do. So it's very cool to see you not only taking on sort of bigger picture conceptual work, but also the very practical, tangible things that make it, that's really the hard part of getting to zero waste and reducing our environmental and social justice impacts um, through the waste stream. And I like being with you guys. It was great to be there with you last year and back tonight. I wish we could be in person. I know that wasn't possible tonight, but it's always nice to really get to meet and see people a little more than through Zoom. But this got a nice presentation for you. Um, as many of you know, my folks, Gail Bourque and Steve Paskowitz are they own a condo there, and my brother lived there for many years, or a number of
Mm.
years before they did. And I have a little Boston whaler that I take out of the Richmond boat launch, so I'm always waving up at you guys as I go by. So just special place. I've spent a number of times down at the pool for celebrations and the community room, mom's birthday and such. And so I just have a real affinity. You have a beautiful location and a real view of what I sometimes say is the incoming plastic from from the ocean. So um, I will. I have a lot of slides to show you, but my interest in this field really came when I started working at the Ecology Center. I knew about recycling generally, like most people did, but I didn't really know. And it's been 25 years now, so I've learned quite a bit on the job and taken the opportunity to really do some deep dives on different subject areas that are critical. And one of the areas is plastic. Ecology Center has a long history of trying to, one of our core values is integrity, sort of honesty, transparency, just being able to take complex issues and just tell the simple truth about them. We're historically I would say layperson's organization. The idea is everyone can be an expert to some degree, and we're not staffed with a bunch of PhDs or academics. Nothing against academics, but it's really sort of grassroots, community based, and philosophy that really important, complex issues of our time could be broken down into bite-sized pieces, and that everyday people like you all can do those things. And uh, I will bring up my presentation if I can. Let's see if I can get it right. New format coming on me here. How's that look? Can people see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Excellent. So tonight, I really want to, take you through a deeper dive on plastic packaging. You already know many of the challenges, but also to get into to some of, the issues with plastic, particularly plastic packaging. Um, and what's the state of play in terms of programs and policies, um, and then, try and keep it super real in terms of discerning between what's the greenwashing and sort of the broader plastic industry narratives versus what's real and happening on the ground. um let's see, give me one sec here. I have a little video I'll show you. I hope the sound's coming through.
No sound.
No sound.
No sound.
All right. So sorry. Anyway, this is a brief video. On our website, ecologycenter.org, you can see our current community impact report. Gives you a good summary of what the organization's about, what we do. But I wanted to share, we do curbside recycling, we do farmers markets, we have a youth environmental program, we have a retail store. I'll touch a little bit more on that with a refill center where you can um, refill body products and shampoos and household cleaning products, etc. But the idea is that we try in Berkeley things that we can do at the local level with the support of our community, and using that opportunity to really amplify our voice, try out things that we can replicate. We're not always the ones replicating, but sometimes taking that to state policy or being involved in national policy, and in some cases, international and global policy. And recently I returned from Geneva, where we were having the second part of the 5th meeting of Global Plastics Treaty negotiation, where globally they're trying to set some regulations, and I'll touch a little bit more on that. But our model for change is really to do stuff locally, see what works, and then use our on the ground experience, hands-on nuts and bolts experience to really try and influence um, how change happens on issues related to waste and recycling, food and farming, plastics, toxics, a number of other issues. We are way we do that. The broader work is through coalition and various alliances and sort of um, partnerships. And so the way that we do it around plastics is through this alliance of mission-based recyclers, and we're founding organization of some of the original nonprofit recyclers around the country who've come together to amplify our voices in an effort to keep recycling real and kind of counter some of the false narratives that we hear out there. Um, and so we use our operations, our facilities, to speak firsthand about recycling. You hear a lot in various industry spaces of people on the packaging side or the brand side or the petrochemical side talking about plastic recycling, and none of them are recyclers and they don't really know and they make stuff up all the time. So we're out there trying to counter the false narratives and the misinformation. We take what we call the view from the pile. Every day there's a big pile of recyclables, and we look at recycling policy and zero waste approaches from that pile. And so our lens is about packaging, it's about residential collection and processing, it's about things that come through people's homes. So there's a whole other world that's industrial scrap and business to business related waste and manufacturing waste, and those are important actually in some cases much larger volumes than what comes through people's homes. But this is our focus. And our focus is mission based. We are not in it for profit. We're nonprofit organizations, and we don't own landfills or incinerators. And that's a big distinction with what you might hear from Republic or Waste Management or Recology or many of the others. Is for them, recycling is a secondary, tertiary level operation. Their real business model is around landfills and incineration. And if they do recycling often because it's part of the. If they want the waste contract, they have to take the recycling side, and they're doing an okay job in many instances. Some are leaders um, in it and take it seriously and doing it for the right reasons. But you kind of got to take that structural element um, as it stands. We subscribe to this zero waste hierarchy. It basically is what you remember from the 1970s: reduce, reuse, and then recycle. Um, and we see recycling as the least best or the most worst of those. And as you go down from there, there's other kinds of in the unacceptable categories, or we think of landfill as being bad. Eventually they're going to leak and contaminate our water, and they're wasteful. And obviously we're still, from our perspective, incinerators are burning all this stuff and releasing toxic emissions into the environment, both through the smokestack and also with the residual ash. Um, so, the good news, the big story, recycling works. It's been working for a long time. It keeps working, despite what you might read in the news. A lot of saucy headlines out there about, oh, recycling's broken. What we mostly do is cans and bottles, paper and cardboard. And that's mostly the same across the whole United States. And so people say, oh, it's so complicated from city to city. It's so different. You get into it, it's really paper and cardboard, cans and bottles. That's what we do. And then you've got a lot of other, brands and packagers saying, well, what about my Keurig cup? That's recyclable. What about a carton? What about a Tetra Pak? What about, all these whatabouts? And really, those are things that, packagers have come up with who didn't consult with us about whether or not it would be recyclable, and they want everyone to believe it is. And for the most part, at this point, it's not. And I'll get into a little bit more of like, can we and should we recycle something? What can we add? When can we add it to the recycling program? But you'll see more than half of the tons here are cardboard and mixed paper. That's our bread and butter. That's a high value material. We want that clean. We want it dry. And mostly it's getting exported out of California. That's not true nationwide, but really from the West Coast, it's very cheap to transport it to Asia. There are a lot of very hungry, large paper mills in Asia. Many of them are more modern than US paper mills. Um, and it's a lot cheaper to send it, makes a lot more sense financially to ship it that way than to try and truck or train it to paper mills in the southeast of the country, which is where most of the other remaining paper mills, or like Michigan. So, as I said, our focus is on packaging. I would say paper and packaging, but newspaper is kind of gone. Headline, shocker. Yeah, when I started, newspaper was at least 40% of our tons, and so in the time that I've been in this career, I've seen this major transformation of the material flows. We used to in Berkeley, we used to collect the Daily Planet, the San Francisco Chronicle, the New York Times, Financial Times. Like these are all daily papers, and we would collect at some residences 4 of them. So it was a lot of tons, a lot of volumes. There used to be uh, phone books. Anybody remember the phone book? When the phone book got delivered, we would get a huge tonnage spike of all these phone books that we're getting. So that's great, that stuff's gone. But it has really, in the sense that we're not cutting down trees to make phone books, right? But on the flip side, that's money that we don't have, and what's replaced it has been online shipping, boxes, Amazon boxes, etc. And a lot of plastic packaging, which is very hard to do anything with, and very expensive to process. And so I like to say plastic is trashing recycling. That's what you're going to hear from me basically in this presentation is all these different types of plastics, the small format, the flexible packaging, the cartons, lined papers. It's just a lot of plastic that's coming through the recycling and packaging. And there's, good reason for it we can talk about, but it's got a lot of problems associated with it too. So like what's happening? There have been lots of local ordinances and local laws passed around different plastic packaging, around bag bans and polystyrene, styrofoam. But really, the big thing that's happened, the fundamental change is this new bill. Senator Allen out of Santa Monica authored this bill, SB 54. It was passed in 2022, and it fundamentally changes the arrangements around, particularly financial arrangements around recycling, and sets some very ambitious goals for packaging. And it's primarily focused on plastic, but it also covers glass. It covers paper and cardboard. It covers cans, aluminum, steel. But very ambitious. It's called an extended producer responsibility bill. It basically shifts the burden of the cost of the end of life for packaging from the consumer, you and me, who pay for garbage collection and recycling collection, to the producer, the brands, the consumer brands. So anything with a logo on it in a package is basically covered under this bill, and it says y'all have to pay for it. upstream. And the idea is that if they have to pay for the end of life, that they'll get a lot better about reducing. So first goal is a 25% reduction of plastic packaging overall by 2032. That is a huge goal because, and it's both by unit and by weight. So by the number of packages and by the weight of those packages. And I say it's a really big goal because they've already lightweighted these things. Like it's already super lightweight. So to reduce by 25%, they can't just make thinner plastic like they've already done that. Um, so a lot of those kind of easy low hanging fruit is not really at their disposal. So that's going to be tough. And then the second goal is they want 65% of all single use packaging to be actually recycled. And by recycled, we mean collected at the curb, brought to a facility, sorted and processed, and sold to an end market that turns it into feedstock. And by feedstock, we mean something that could replace a virgin material for manufacturing. So in the case of plastics, that's like turning it back into a pellet or what they call flake, something that can be melted down and used as a replacement for a virgin plastic. So it's a high standard. It's not just we put it in the cart and therefore it's recycled. It's no, 65% is actually making it all the way back into feedstock for manufacturing. And then the third goal is that 100% of packaging in California could be recycled or composted. Um, and this is a very challenging one. And there's in this is super ambitious. As you all know, we're in one of the largest economies in the world. What happens in California absolutely will drive what happens in other states. It already is, but also in other countries around the globe. Well, like I said, I was in Geneva. There's a lot of talk about this bill and applying it in other countries around the planet. So people are watching very closely. Um, these are the top line sort of major goals, but there's a lot of other detail in there, which is also very complex and important. I'll get into a little bit of it, but this is moving. This is a fast moving train. It's got very ambitious goals. Um, it is going to create winners and losers. It's a huge financial impact on the brands, and many of them have their heads in the sand about it. And there's like a freight train coming at them. That some of them are more aware than others. Let's just put it that way. Um, I said that it covers anything with a brand on it. Um, so, you know, all the single use plastic packaging you would find at your local supermarket, um, convenience store. It also covers foodware. So all the takeout, um, uh, cups, trays, clamshells, wraps, cutlery. Um, what's not covered, it doesn't cover anything in the beverage redemption program. Anything that you already pay a California redemption value, CRV, that 5 or 10 cents on cans and bottles. Those are all exempt because they're already covered under the beverage law. Doesn't include any medical products, pill bottles, etc. Paint containers, there is a separate paint program where the manufacturers already pay for paint recycling and paint container recycling. Same for pesticides, hazardous materials, and no long-term storage. So anything that's not, even if it's single use, if it's durable, I think the standard is something that you would keep for 5 years. I'm not sure about that. There is a standard. Anyways, something that you would hold on to for a long time would not be covered. So how will this be enforced? How will it run? How does it work? Well, the state, maybe I have a better slide for this. No. Yeah. The state has an agency, CalRecycle, that oversees all all the state programs and all the legislative implementation enforcement. And CalRecycle will set the rules and requirements, and then this third party PRO, Producer Responsibility Organization, is supposed to collect all the money from all the brands, all the covered packaging materials, and then spend the money to achieve the goals that we talked about. And they have selected, there is really only one PRO in the United States at this point. It's Circular Action Alliance. These are the board members. On the one hand, it's like, really, you're gonna sort of give the, what is it, the hens to the fox? You're gonna put the fox in charge of the hen house here. But that's the idea. Ultimately, is that the brands need to take responsibility. They need to pay, and they need to actually execute against the goals. So the critical piece here is that there's state oversight, and there's an advisory committee that helps to add transparency and do some advising. They don't have any teeth, unfortunately, but is real teeth in this bill. If brands are found to be out of compliance, for example, let's say Procter and Gamble says, "Great, I'm all in. I'm going to do what you guys tell me. I'm going to pay the money I'm supposed to pay. I'm going to change my packaging in the ways you say. I'm going to follow the laws." But then their competitor, Johnson and Johnson, says, "Yeah, we're not really going to do it." The penalties are $50,000 a day. So it's real money. That adds up pretty quick. A lot of our penalties in the past in this arena have been very modest. And then you end up with like Coke and Pepsi saying, "Yeah, we'd like to use more recycled content, but it's cheaper for us to not comply with the law and pay the penalty." So they got very serious about the penalties here. The consequences of noncompliance are very severe, in addition to all of the negative press that they would get, and lawsuits, et cetera. CAA is operating in California, but there are new EPR bills in Colorado, Maryland, Minnesota, Oregon, and there's a new one passing in Washington. New York's around the corner. This is again a fast-moving train of policy that states are adopting. And CAA, is basically the company that's the organization. It's a nonprofit that is going to provide this producer responsibility function. The timeline look like? Well, they passed the law. They've gone through 2 years of public process on creating the rules. So the law is kind of general, create a bunch of rules. They were about to adopt the rules in March when the governor intervened and told them he wanted some changes. And we feel like some of these big packagers got in a back room with him and cut some deals, potentially related to their support for his run for president or something. Who knows? Speculating. But there were some ways in which they limited the coverage, the scope of what's covered, gave some bigger exemptions, and then cracked open some doors that we thought we had slammed shut around chemical recycling and processing plastic through chemical processes that have a lot of challenges and problems with it. So they're redoing the regs or the rules. The rules are in their final round at this point. We expect there'll be the final draft will be released this year. Be one more round of public comment on it, and then that'll be it on the rules. And then the Producer Responsibility Organization, CAA, is supposed to come forward with their plan, and their plan is really important. It basically says how they're going to collect the money and how they're going to spend it to meet the goals. And we will have opportunities to weigh in on that as the public. Ultimately, Cal Recycle has to approve it. But we're, modestly optimistic and also concerned that this plan will have flaws and problems and not do what it's supposed to do to the degree that it is. And then by 2028, really 30% of plastic packaging is supposed to be recycled, 2030, 40%, and then 2032, 65% of plastic packaging is supposed to be recycled. Today in California, we're nowhere near any of those numbers on all of the packaging, even the things that are currently widely accepted as recyclable, PET bottles, shampoo bottles, soda bottles, recycling rates without the redemption value, 35% is a good number. So this is ambitious even for the things that are already being recycled. And then there's whole categories in the supermarket where there is no plan currently for how those things could ever be recycled. So it's going to be an interesting bunch of years running into 2032. Get your popcorn. It's a big goal, as I was just saying. 285 Olympic swimming pools worth of plastic are thrown away in California every day. And, it's super lightweight stuff. A lot of it's small format. So if you think of the number of individual packages and how different each of those are in terms of their chemical composition, the goal of trying to reduce 25% of that is a massive goal. Getting it all to be quote unquote recyclable or compostable means that a lot of things are just going to have to go away because there's no pathway for them to be compostable or recyclable. If they aren't compostable or recyclable in 2032, you can't sell them. You can't use it in the state of California. It's an effective ban on a whole bunch of categories of plastic. And, think about everything from, small format cosmetic products, chapstick containers, think about toothpaste tubes, think about all of the soft and flexible packaging out there, which I'll get into in a second. It's just a lot of things that currently are not recyclable, and they have a very short window to try and make them recyclable. So, and then let's say they're all quote unquote recyclable, to actually get them into a recycling system, get them collected, sorted, and sold into a responsible end market. It's a big lift. So this is the challenge before us. It's going to be exciting. We're going to see changes on the shelves. You're going to see products that you've known for decades to be in some format or another to be in something new and different and hopefully better. But it's quite complex. And I thought I'd do just a couple more slides and then pause for Q&A. Does that sound like a good plan? And then there's some other slides after that. So from Amber and the Ecology Center perspective, we have a three-phase way of to think about what might we add to a recycling program. And the first thing, what makes something recyclable? Can we? These are just the hard logistics and financial operational questions. Can we collect it? Can we sort it? Is there anybody who will buy it? And, financially, can we make it work? And so that's, the basics of can we? And sometimes we can, and sometimes we can't. But, we also think about should we? And this is the stuff that mostly the big brands and, the big garbage companies don't think too much about the should part. It's just more about, will you pay me to do it? And we're thinking about, does it actually reduce extraction in plastics, particularly, are we keeping anything in the ground? What are the environmental impacts? Sometimes recycling can have negative environmental impacts. What are those? Is it worth it? Does the cost benefit weigh out? Is there some other approach where we could reduce it? And we should do that first, because remember, it goes reduce, reuse, recycle. So should we? No, let's reduce it. Let's get rid of it. What are the impacts on workers? What are the labor impacts? Are there toxicity impacts both for workers, for the environment, for neighboring communities? And are there environmental justice issues? Is this happening in places where people are already experiencing disproportionate burdens, environmental burdens of our society, and not reaping the same benefits as other people. And then our last framework is sort of compared to what? So I'll give you an example. Compared to what is in Berkeley or in Richmond, if you don't recycle that beverage bottle, that soda bottle, let's say, um, it will probably end up in the garbage. It might end up in the bay, but let's just say it ends up in the garbage. It goes to a landfill. That's not great. Sucks. But, not killing anybody, not hurting anybody right now. Um, in Minneapolis, where our colleagues at Eureka Recycling are in Amber, if you don't recycle that, it goes to the incinerator and then you breathe it. So the compared to what is, sort of an important factor, if we compare it to reduce versus recycle, it's always better to reduce. Reuse is almost always pencils out better than recycling. So what are we comparing it to? We don't just look at it and sort of like, well, we have to recycle it, because we've got our blinders on. So why don't we pause there and take a few questions or comments, and then I'll talk about some of the challenges and issues that are coming up as they work through some of these regs and the upcoming plan. Any questions?
I'm going to ask folks if you just to either raise your hand on your camera or use the, I think you'll see it. You should see a tool in below under React where you can raise a hand. If you click on React, you can do that, and we'll make sure that you're unmuted. I have some questions, but I want to give other people a chance to ask first.
There's one in the chat here from Leslie. Would you please talk about the compostable starch-based plastics? Are the current green bin contents going to hot compost scenario and actually breaking down? How are compost products being used? Yeah, so the compost side of this thing is huge too, because we have another bill, SB 1383, which is a greenhouse gas reduction law. It's totally innovative, very ambitious, leading the world. It says we have to get 75% of the things that can rot and produce methane in a landfill. We have to get 75% of those out of the landfills to reduce methane, which is a much more potent greenhouse gas than even CO2. And California's approach to that is we're going to compost it. We're going to take it out of the landfill and we'll compost it in conditions where we're not producing methane. And the rules and regs around that compost and the financials around it are really being driven by what those composters can sell as certified organic feedstock for agricultural production. And so it's really being driven by this national process. This is complicated. The organic standards process, which regulates in the United States what is considered organic or not, and whether or not you could use compost from one of these facilities on an organic farm determines whether or not the state is going to call something compostable. And there is a lot of argument right now about whether compostable starches, and also compostable plastics meet that national organic standard. And I think it's great that they're putting a very high standard there. And at the same time, that leaves us with some very tough questions at the sort of practical level of if it's not going to be plastic, could it be compostable plastic or not? So these regs are all starting to sort of intertwine and get connected. But to answer your question specifically, in Richmond, Republic runs a composting facility out there by the landfill. It's a what we call a aerated static pile, which is a very fast compost process. So one of the ways that California doesn't have the infrastructure to take all 75% of that stuff, it's a lot more volume. And so one of the ways that they're trying to respond to that is by pushing compost through the compost facilities faster. They have the aerated static pile. You make one big pile. It's got a bunch of pipes through it, and they pump air through it, and they really get it cooking hot. And does that stuff break down in there? Well, some does and some doesn't. And it's kind of a matter of dosage. A little bit of it is no big deal, breaks down. But if we're getting 65% of the packaging is now compostable and going through these compost facilities, and now compost facilities are not composting yard waste and kitchen scraps, they're composting packaging, the system's not going to work as well. So currently, you can look on your little brochure and it'll tell you whether or not Richmond will accept the specific items you want. If they're not getting composted, they get sorted out and sent to landfill after the fact. Sometimes they will pull them out at the front end if they know they're not going to decompose. So I can't give you a definitive answer, but there's a bunch more information about it. Wendy, did you have a question?
Unmute
get off.
yourselves.
Hold on, wait, let me. Yeah, you should be able to go ahead now, Wendy. I
Thanks.
unmuted you.
So Martin, I wondered, I've read several articles recently about the plastic bottles that we can buy at the supermarket or Costco that have, they're convenient, that have water in them, but that there's little tiny plastic micro pieces of plastic that get into our bodies and stuff like that. I wondered if you could say a few words about that. I stopped buying them a long time ago because that was pretty scary.
Yeah. So microplastic is just plastic, when they say, oh, it breaks down, what they usually mean plastic breaking down is that it degrades and it breaks up into smaller pieces. But at the molecular level, it stays the same. And one of the problems with those small bits of plastic out in the environment is that they're like sponges for other toxic chemicals. I call them the bad nasties. We're talking about persistent organic pollutants. These means forever chemicals that interact with our bodies. So hence the bad nasties. Like we don't like that. These are things like carcinogens, reproductive toxins, things that that mimic our hormones, endocrine disruptors. And then of course there's acute toxins, which can just make you sick. But a lot of them, are sort of more long-term accumulative. And as you mentioned, we're finding microplastics, these tiny plastics. And now they're looking at nanoplastics, even tinier plastics. In our bloodstream, they're finding them crossing the blood-brain barrier in the brain. They're finding them in mother's milk. They have found them crossing the placenta and in the placenta. They're finding them in men's testicles. These are not good places to be finding things that carry a lot of toxins with them. Some of them have toxins in them and or are toxic in and of themselves, like polystyrene. Styrofoam is made from styrene. Styrene is a known carcinogen. Apparently, when you make it into polystyrene, it's not carcinogenic anymore. I never understood the chemistry of that, but that's what the industry says. But you don't want tiny bits of polystyrene building up in your body. Where are we getting this into our bodies? Well, I bet if we brainstorm together right now, we could think of 5 places that you commonly get plastic in your body. Packaging, your plastic cutting board, that pepper grinder with the plastic thing in there, maybe your tooth guard that you're grinding away the little plastic bit. Those are some obvious ones, but it's in our drinking water. It's in the air we breathe. It's coming off of carpet in our houses, and we're breathing it and ingesting it that way. So there's just a lot of sources. It's going to be number one, it's a massive global experiment. We don't know what the long-term effects of this are yet. There isn't a lot of health research directly tying microplastics to other kinds of health problems, but logically, common sense tells you can't be good. Um, and then um, the science is kind of still out on what are the major sources, and how, and what are the pathways to the human body. Um, my opinion is, particularly if you're of reproductive age and you're thinking about having kids, these endocrine disruptors are a real problem. Phthalates in particular, classic chemicals that mimic our hormones really well. Um, that plastic bottle, the drinking bottle, is a phthalate in and of itself, and then they use more phthalates to make it flexible and soft and to shape it and stuff. So all of that could be getting in the water. It's not really well tested. And then the microplastics are coming from many different sources. And sort of like, how do we reduce our toxic load overall? Like, eat organic, don't buy your food in plastic, don't heat your food in plastic. And that means like cooking on Teflon is bad. Don't want to do that. Don't want to microwave or heat food in plastic, put it in glass. Um, there's a good film recently released on this called We Are All Plastic People Now. Just put it in the chat. Be a cool
Great.
screening. You could probably get it. It's a little intense in how deep it goes into sort of how microplastic is getting into our bodies and what the impacts might be. But a really good film.
Martin, there's
I
another
see.
question in the chat.
Are there small companies using methane to produce biodegradable polymers? I know what I know about is Mango Materials. I think their work is a positive contribution to creating biodegradable polymers. I don't know that much about turning methane into biodegraded polymers, plastics. I know more about turning corn or other starches into bioplastics. It's sort of mostly what I would say about that is that at the end of life, it really depends on, is it really breaking down in the real world? Is it really biodegradable? Does it break down in our composting systems? And I think what we're going to see as this law moves forward, there's a whole bunch of packaging that is, they're going to either need to get rid of. They're going to need to find some kind of substitution, like maybe this Mango Materials. But there's also like seaweed-based packaging, and there's all this stuff, mushroom-based packaging, all these things that are coming out. I think that some will switch and go back to what they were in before, because almost everything in one of these new plastic formats was in something else before. Like Campbell's Soup is moving all their soup into plastic pouches. Particularly problematic for like clam chowder, which is milk-based, has a lot of fat, absorbs a lot of chemicals.
Mm.
But maybe they'll go back to their iconic Campbell Soup can. So I think there's going to be a lot of diversity, a lot of new things coming out. And then the question is going to be like, who's out there actually vetting these things? Go ahead, Clark.
Yeah, I had a question. I wonder about do you happen to know about the possibilities for substitutes or some improvements on the use of the resin indicator code number 5? One thing I've noticed is that it's pretty close to impossible to get yogurt commercially except in number 5s and a lot of other food products like that. And we know it's not being recycled here in this area. It's going straight to landfill. Um, are there any possibilities out there other than making your own yogurt that you're aware of?
So by 2032, it will either be recyclable or it'll be in another container. Um, that's
Some,
that's the magic plan here. Big gap between those two things. But mostly there are markets for number five polypropylene, all the dairy tubs. Um, uh, there's mostly one big market, KW, in the Midwest, and they make paint buckets. So it's sort of a one step further from the landfill kind of recycling. Call it
yeah.
downcycling, but that's the market that's out there currently. And there's some plastic lumber and other things they make with it. But it is prohibitively expensive to get that from California out to KW. And so we end up with what we call a negative market, which just means we have to pay to get rid of it. And we don't like negative markets.
They
um,
don't work so
but
well.
this is where the PRO, Circular Action Alliance, can come in. They could say, we're going to pay the difference, and wave a magic wand, and suddenly it becomes economically viable. And so that they're going to figure out how to get it to market, or they'll invest in new markets and say, we're going to open a plant in California that does what KW does, only we're going to do it in California, and now the transportation will be cheap. A lot of other things might be expensive trying to do it here, but um,
Yeah.
so that's kind of where polypropylene is. I think it's one of the low hanging fruit for the packagers. Mm, Danone and Knudson's and many of the large dairy producers that use those formats are extremely wedded to them. They have tried to do some other things in their test pilots, and they always come back to, how do we make this recyclable? Um, so my guess is that they're going to suck it up and they're just going to pay and make it, because mechanically, like sorting, processing, collecting, like the can we, um, like we can do all of this with polypropylene. The issue is just that the transportation is too expensive. And the should we is not too bad on it. I mean, compared to what, of course, but relatively speaking, polypropylene is not, and the additives that we know about in polypropylene are not, um, top of the list toxics, or, um, and having many of these other should we issues. Um, I'll just say, like, on the microplastics front and on the toxics front and the leaching and all of that, I don't think it's great to have dairy in plastic, period, because dairy has a lot of fat, and fat absorbs toxic chemicals. And then we eat it. And nobody's like, it's terrible to see the administration tearing down the FDA um, and the state agency, EPA, et cetera. They weren't that great to begin with, but they're the best, some of the best in the world, next to Europe, really. But who's really testing our yogurt for the kinds of things that we'd be most concerned about? Are they taking endocrine disruptors seriously? Do they really take into account the multiple exposures and the many different chemical, the mix of toxic chemicals that we're facing? So make your own. There have been a couple brands who've used glass and refillable. It's really small, but I'd love to see some more artisanal. It'd be more expensive, surely, unless maybe PRO will pay for refill and reuse. They have requirements in that area as well. What are the best ways to reduce exposure to plastics? RO water treatment. I'm not sure what RO stands for. Help me out. Many years ago, scientists expressed concerns about volatile toxic compounds in water being vaporized in showers. Yes, there are issues for some particularly sensitive folks. I mean, let's start with like in the Bay Area, in the East Bay, we have some of the best water in the world, and we flush it down the toilet, literally. That said, filters are really good. Reverse osmosis filtration, in particular. Those systems are not expensive. You can easily get them installed or set up under your kitchen sink. Highly recommend. Even a Brita filter is better than nothing. I don't know about, they say your skin is your largest receptor organ. That was kind of a wake up moment for me. So, okay, shower, what am I absorbing? But it makes me think much more about like perfume and lotion and colognes and some of the things there. Reverse osmosis, thank you. Yeah. Um, um, yeah, for sure. I don't know about the effect of vaporizing versus taking a bath. But I'll just start with what we're working with here in California, and particularly, with Ebmud and the great water we get from the McCalmy River. We're pretty blessed. We're pretty lucky. And it's easy for us to say, oh, just drink the tap water, which totally, like, drink the tap water, don't buy the bottled water. You have no idea where it's coming from. You don't know what's in it. It's not really tested. And it's been sitting in a plastic bottle for who knows how long. Drink your tap water, use a filter, get a refillable bottle, a metal one. Um, but and um, you can think about all the other ways, like that your food and water is in contact with plastic and maybe picking up microbits of plastic. I'm going to continue on. I don't have a ton more slides, but I do have kind of a cautionary tale. Come back. We have time for some other Q&A. From our perspective, we want to start with the worst stuff. Like, can we get rid of the bad nasties, the unnecessary and problematic plastics? In particular, number 3, PVC, polyvinyl chloride. Any time that chlorine is in contact is oxygenated through a burning process, heating process. Like when you burn PVC, it will create dioxin. Dioxin's, class 1, unsafe at any speed, bad, nasty chemical. It lasts forever. There is no sort of threshold for what's an okay acceptable amount. So we should just get rid of PVC. We use it in piping a lot. It's pretty much out of the packaging industry, except there's a lot of labels that use PVC. Like you buy a Gatorade bottle, it's a nice number 1 or number 2 bottle, and then they shrink wrap it with PVC. And if that goes through, that can contaminate a whole bale of good, quote unquote good PET number 1 PET bottles, is just having some of those labels in there. We should get rid of that stuff. A lot of the low density polyethylene number 2 carry out bags, unnecessary and problematic. Let's get rid of those. That's what our state law has been. We started San Francisco, Alameda County, number of cities around the state, and then got state law passed. And now that's getting cleaned up because we got those thicker bags. It's going in the wrong direction. So let's get rid of those. The polystyrene I already talked about, super toxic to manufacture, really problematic. Fence line community issues around polystyrene production and disposal. We can do better. We don't need it. Oh no, I need it. The world will end if I don't have polystyrene packaging for my appliance in the box. No, we've got cardboard, we've got other stuff we can use, right? Well, what about the polystyrene peanuts? We have alternatives for that. I think we should just get rid of it. Number 7 is all other plastics, including compostable, but other. It's like, who even knows what they're putting in it? And then in addition to all of these that are more suitable, many of them have additives. And so there's chemicals of concern. This is the term that's used the national and international level. Chemicals of concern. We call them toxic chemicals, but they want to call them chemicals of concern. Fair enough. This is additives that are inks and dyes, things that are UV blockers so sunlight won't get in and degrade something. They're things that change how stretchy or flexible or at what temperature the melting point of the plastic is. And some of them need to be just eliminated as a class, like anything with chlorine or fluorine, we shouldn't be using at all. And then others are more specific in terms of their chemistry. And then the flexible multi-layer plastic packaging is just not recyclable, and it's got a ton of problems with it, but it's so cheap and it's so convenient, and it helps with shelf stable and food safety and reduces spoilage, and it's cheap to transport. Like, there's so many benefits on the packaging side and the manufacturer side and the consumer convenience. But there's, again, horrible beginning of life, terrible end of life. We got to find some solutions to that. I don't think recycling it is the way forward. I want to just quickly tell you cautionary tale about when the last time they said, let's make it all recyclable, was around all the rigid plastic containers. So cups, berry containers, clamshells, rigid plastic containers, number 5s we were talking about. Because before it was just number 1 and number 2s that were accepted in recycling programs. And then the American Chemistry Council went around telling everybody, oh, it's all recyclable. You should collect it all. If you collect enough of it, you'll get more of the stuff that's really recyclable. And if you get a big enough pile of this stuff that currently isn't, someone will want to buy it. And, really made consumers happy. Like, oh, great, everything's recyclable. And it promoted this kind of wish cycling. We at the Ecology Center were kind of super late adopters. We pushed back against this for years. And eventually, every city around us was accepting all plastics. And we got kind of forced to do it too. So it's all this stuff, especially those black plastic ones. Like, you can't do anything with them. The Tupperware is not recyclable. This whole plethora of things had a lot of challenges with it. We had a market initially in China where we had direct line of sight, and we knew what they were doing with it. And they were pulling out some things that they could recycle and then sorting out all the rest of the stuff they couldn't. And they were sending that to a landfill. And they had permits and they had records, and it was probably the best we could expect in a Chinese market. Not one that would have been permitted in California, but on the should we front, it wasn't terrible. That market closed down pretty quickly. They figured out that was not a line of business they wanted to be in. They had lots of other good plastics they were working on recycling, good in quotes. And so then we were selling to brokers who were selling to other brokers, and then into this informal sector. And we actually put GPS trackers on our bales to see where this stuff was going. And this is what we found. Backyard, small scale, informal sector, wastewater being dumped right into the surface water. So you can, first thing they do is they pop the bales, they sort it in these baskets, and then they run it through this chipper, which is kind of like a backyard wood chipper. And then they would wash it. So full of microplastics for sure, and everything else. And then that's getting washed and just right into the surface water, which downstream people use for drinking water and for washing their clothes and bathing and things. So it's pretty horrible. And then open dumping and burning of the open dumping when the piles got too big. Runoff going right into neighboring housing or worker housing. So just horrible. We stopped selling to this market. There was a big expose, movie called Plastic China, which exposed all of this. It actually eventually got shut down by the Chinese government, both the movie and this whole informal sector. I call it the dirty decade. These are exports of these mixed plastics out of the US. And really, until 2004, 2005, there wasn't that much being exported. And it was really, developing nations and China in particular that started buying it all. And it was running through these informal sectors and really externalizing all the costs, labor costs, environmental costs, the toxic implications, et cetera. And it really wasn't until the Chinese government intervened in 2017 with a policy called National Sword, which was really a huge cleanup, part of their blue sky environmental cleanup, multi-sector environmental cleanup. And you can see the blue bar from 2017 to 2018 just pretty much disappears. That's a command and control government for you. When they want to do something and they're serious, they're very effective. But what did happen was that many of those other neighboring countries also started to follow suit, and then we had international regulation through the United Nations Basel Convention. And you can see that the developing nations dropped off quite a bit. Other OECD countries, that's mostly Canada. So there are some markets in Canada, and those have been really stable. And then Mexico has started to tick up a little bit, and we're a little concerned about transshipping, where something goes to Mexico and then it gets shipped someplace else. But let's not do that with flexible and film. We're very concerned about trying to turn around and say, oh, we'll just make this soft plastic. And what I'm talking about here are bags, wrappers, chip bags, candy wrappers, everything in Trader Joe's on that whole shelf of nuts. It's like a whole wall of pouches with the little Ziploc thing, and very convenient. Makes all those nuts very shelf stable. They can sit there a long time. Good on the food safety, but terrible on the recycling. And so our concerns are that when you add it into the mix of recyclables, it acts like paper. It's two-dimensional. And one of the main sorting processes that you may have seen, I know some of you visited the facility in Richmond there, I think my parents said. Anyways, one of the main things that happens first is they break the glass and take the glass out of the stream. And then they separate three-dimensional items from two-dimensional items. There's a thing called the ballistic sorter. And all this flexible pouches act kind of like a piece of cardboard or paper, more like that than they do like a bottle or a can. And so they go with the paper. And once it's in the paper, it's really hard to get out. Almost impossible. Not impossible, almost impossible. And if it's exported with the paper to mills that were originally built to make tissue paper out of tropical hardwood, and their feedstock is now US exported paper scrap that's full of plastic, there's a few different things that can happen when they sort it out of the paper pulp. One is they can send it to a landfill. That's expensive and has its whole host of other challenges in a country like Malaysia or Thailand or Indonesia than we would have here with a landfill in the US. So that's one option. More likely, because it's petroleum based, it's got BTUs, it's got energy. It's probably going to get burned. So where is it going to get burned? First option would be to burn it at the paper mill. Paper is, I like to say paper is mostly water and energy. It used to be coal, but it's mostly water and energy. And the pulp is sort of the medium for that. But they burn it at the mill to dry the pulp when they're making the paper. Um, or they might sell it to a cement kiln and use it to make cement, another super energy intensive industry. Um, Neither paper mills nor cement kilns are regulated as incinerators. And so the environmental requirements, both in the US, in developed and developing nations, the environmental regulations on them are much lower. They're considered manufacturing processes. They're not considered disposal. And so the regulations are lower. And particularly in countries that have, let's say, challenged regulatory environments or low regulatory environments, not all of them do. Like, I'm really impressed with Malaysia. They have really good environmental standards and qualities and good system and checks and balances, but not everybody does. And some of them are terrible. No matter what's on the book, something else is happening. It's just not good if that stuff gets burned. And then the third option is that those things, that plastic scrap gets sold to informal sector markets. And that's really the biggest worry. And this is what it looks like coming out of a paper mill. This are shots from some of our colleagues in Indonesia. So you recognize this kind of packaging is like, your frozen shrimp and I can't even recognize all the things, but you would recognize this stuff, right? And then there's all this shredded stuff. The shredded stuff gets shredded in the paper mill, and then they wash it all together, and then the paper floats and the pulp sinks. And so then they can scrape this off the top, and they're dumping it and they're selling it to neighboring industries. So this is a nearby community where truckloads of this stuff come and just dump it. And then they feed it into this furnace to make lye, like to cook limestone and make lye for construction and other purposes. But it's just an open burn, basically. And, you got kids playing around this. And then the ash is like this tar goop, residual ash, and they spread that out on the road. And it ends up acting something like asphalt. So this is horrible. This is like the worst it could be. And we don't have any idea of what the current scope of this is really out there. But we know that if we try and push 65% of all plastic flexible packages through our current recycling infrastructure, there will be a lot more of this. And so this is something we're watching very closely with the PRO. And as they try to make all of these difficult to recycle materials, they try and push them through recycling. We're there saying, no, we don't want it. Oops. We don't want it in our cart. If you want to collect that stuff, you better find another way to collect it. And if you want to sell it, you better have a better market, a more environmentally and socially responsible market than some of these paper mills that might be meeting all of their regulatory requirements in country. I don't know. So just to wrap up, like, everything that is in a pouch today was in something else before it. And I hope that we'll reduce some, we'll find some other alternatives, we'll go back to prior packaging that's more recyclable, even if it's heavier, even if it's more expensive. And really, I hope we'll see a sort of a new explosion or revolution in packaging that's really refillable and reuse focused. So that's what I got for y'all tonight. Happy to answer more questions or go down some other rabbit holes if you like.
Any other questions for Martin? I see a lot of thumbs up. I'm just sort of looking through the chat here for just a quick second. Um, Leslie asks, says that the general public is not very knowledgeable. They don't separate things well. True of us. How can they be better educated? If they don't care, how can they be shamed into caring and wanting to be educated? Do you want to,
Yeah,
any comment you want to make or?
yeah. So one of the upsides of the PRO and CAA and this whole EPR bill, how about that for some alphabet soup? Um, this extended producer responsibility requires education. They are going to have a pretty significant statewide campaign that will be operating at a very general level. So some of you were certainly around in the 90s when recycling went mainstream in California. And there was a lot of education money at that time. And there was just a lot of education about recycling that happened at that time because of state law that passed in 1989, requiring every city to have a curbside recycling program. We're going to see something on that kind of order of magnitude with some, the people who are best at branding. We call it education, they call it marketing. We're going to have top-notch marketers pushing recycling. Now, our goal is to have them saying the right things, which they may or may not be doing. But they will also be paying local haulers to do more education, and they'll be providing them with materials and messaging and, professional grade education assets, resources. So that's a good thing. More education is good. In Berkeley, we have this split cart. I don't know, you can't kind of see it, but it's got a divider down it, and one side is for cans and bottles, and the other side is for paper and cardboard. That little bit of source separation that the customer has to take just a split second to think, does it go this side or this side? Often then results in also like, oh, well, maybe it doesn't go on either side. And our paper comes out of these carts, out of our trucks, cleaner than paper I've seen coming out of the recycling processing after sorting. And I like to attribute that to highly educated, very motivated, environmentally expert Berkeley residents. But I think it has a lot to do with the cart, actually, because, even some of the most environmentally forward folks either don't do it right or don't care that much in the end. So I think there's some structural things that can be done too about how we recycle things. So for example, on this flexible and film packaging, I don't know if y'all have Ridwell at Brickyard. Ridwell is a collector of hard to recycle things, including soft plastic packaging, including clothing and tennis shoes. They do batteries, they do a number of things. But it's like $20 a month per household. It's pretty expensive. Will the PRO, CAA, will they pay for something like Ridwell, where you could separate at the home some of this stuff and you had a different bin for something else? That's the kind of structural distinction. And could you get clean, dry, flexibles sorted out before they get to the recycling facility, so we don't ever see anything like that open burning? I don't know. It's to be determined. On the wire burning, I have seen that in real life. A lot of wire. It's a question in the chat. Electrical wire is generally coated with PVC. And the way it gets recycled in unregulated environments is they burn it. They burn the plastic off, and then they get the metal, and it's super toxic. And I have seen some real horror stories from that. Particularly, Africa has become a major destination for wire recycling because the regulatory context in some countries is just non-existent. So, yeah, horrific. What else do we got here? Leslie's got a bunch of good questions. Poor people going through recycling containers to make some money. Um, this is really interesting. You know, in the US, they're called canners. In the global South, they call themselves waste pickers. Um, Scavengers is another term, really pejorative term, poachers. Um, but basically, they'll go through the recycling bins and pull out the CRV value. Anything with a bottle deposit on it is mostly what they're after. There is also the scavenger, what we call them the mosquito fleet, that collects all the cardboard. And they have, you know, small pickup trucks and stuff. They're quite efficient. Um, but it's a tough thing. How do you make sure that the work is being if you're so for us in Berkeley, we generally don't enforce the laws around that kind of canning and scavenging, unless it becomes a informal business operation where there's trucks and there's people paying people, and you know it gets, and we've seen that happen sometimes. And then they're like competing with union jobs but not paying union wages. There's no workers' comp insurance. They're not paying taxes, and we're sort of competing with them for material. It's like, no, no, no. That's not going to play either. But you know, could this model of the redemption value be applied to other materials? Like, could you put a deposit on all cosmetic products? And would people bring them back to the store in order to redeem the value of their compact or their face cream container or whatever it is? It's really hard to recycle through the curbside bin because they're small and they fall through. Um, Alternatively, or you know, could we put in a deposit value that the brands pay, not the consumer, that the brands pay on these pouches or chip bags or candy wrappers? And then, yeah, maybe people would pick them up off the street. Maybe they would sort through garbage to get them. Um, you'd want to, you know, make sure that you're compensating people just in a just way for that. Um, yeah, using shopping carts. Yeah, we've seen it all. Shopping carts, baby strollers, um, hand carts, backpacks, big bags. Um, yeah, yeah. I think there's you know, we call them deposit return systems, DRS, deposit return systems. I think there is they will have a greater role to play in the future. Where that happens and who has access and what they, you know, how it really works. I think there are some like reverse vending machines. And I think we'll start to see more of that sort of automated return for deposit kind of systems for some of this packaging.
Well, this has been great. If there aren't any further questions, I just will want to just thank Martin for preparing this kind of talk and sharing his knowledge and insight with us. It's yeah, I see a lot of hands applauding. It's you know, it's great to go away somewhat hopeful, but without too many illusions, and that's sort of where we want people to be. And I know that's about where I am after hearing what you've had to say. Um,
Yeah, thanks. I want to say that um, you know, these big, massive California bills, they're experiments. We're going to see how they unfold, and I'm like I said, what did I say? Hopelessly optimistic? No, I'm cautiously optimistic. And trying to keep it accountable, make it right. And we're going to do the best we can. And then hopefully we'll be able to improve from there. But it's an exciting time. Thank you all for doing everything you're doing. We'd love to have you as Ecology Center members and donors. You can do that on the ecologycenter.org website. Just click the donate button. Your support goes to help us do the things that the recycling contract won't let us do in Sacramento. So keeping an eye on the public policy work and advancing pilot projects and other initiatives. So if you've given before, thank you very much. We really appreciate the support. If you could support this work, we got a lot of it to do in the coming year. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's absolutely a worthy organization that I would encourage donations to. And we made some small contributions ourselves. We will in the
Thank you.
future.
Thank you.
There-
Well, thanks again for inviting me, and keep up the good work.
Yeah,
Thank you. You keep up the good work, Martin. That's great.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for participating. This will be we'll send a link out with the to the YouTube recording of this and any follow-up information. Thank you everybody for coming and participating.